Nitrogen is a key element and it plays an important role in just about all stages of human life. So, what is the nitrogen cycle? The nitrogen cycle is a series of processes by which nitrogen and its compounds are converted into different forms of the element. These processes take place both in the natural ecosystem as well as in different living organisms. Some of these processes include nitrogen fixation as well as decomposition. So, in order to move through each stage of the cycle, nitrogen must change its forms multiple times. Humans also have a large impact on the nitrogen cycle and its various components. Some of these sources of human impact are burning fossil fuels, the application of nitrogen-based fertilizers, and things like sewage, trash, and other forms of human pollution. Scientists have actually determined that humans often disrupt the nitrogen cycle by affecting the amount of nitrogen that is naturally stored in our biosphere. One of the main impacts of this is fossil fuel combustion, which releases harmful elements into the air, which form things like smog and even acid rain.
How does the nitrogen cycle influence biological systems? Nitrogen is one of the primary nutrients critical for the survival of all living organisms. It is a necessary component for biomolecules such as proteins, DNA, and chlorophyll. Only when nitrogen is converted from N2 or dinitrogen into NH3, which is ammonia, is when it becomes useful to primary producers such as plants. The transformation of nitrogen into its many oxidation states is key to productivity in the biosphere. The assemblage of microorganisms such as bacteria, archaea, and fungi is highly dependent on these different oxidation states.
Nitrogen is the main reason why there is increased emission, which is associated with global warming. This results in bad weather like acid rain. Too much nitrogen in the environment can cause pollution and harder to breathe. Nitrogen decomposition can affect the human health, atmosphere, and plant productivity. Nitrogen can cause ammonia in the atmosphere. This affects the rainfall and cloud water. Therefore, nitrogen has enhanced decomposition on land, but it badly affected the atmosphere and environment. Nitrogen decomposition is the breakdown of protein in plants and nitrogen waste to release energy. This ammonium goes into the soil where plants are. Nitrogen decomposition happens when fossil fuel is burning into the air. Nitrogen decomposition affects the biodiversity because it can damage plants and its nutrients intake. Too much nitrogen can be a disadvantage. Also, it is harmful for humans because nitrogen can cause pollution in the air and harder to breathe the clean air.
So, how does nitrogen deposition change within an ecosystem? Enhanced nitrogen deposition is the consequence of global emissions of oxidized nitrogen. Some examples of oxidized nitrogen is NO, HNO3, and NO2. Some positive changes in an ecosystem is deposition can increase plant growth, but instead of many positive, there are a lot of negatives that come with deposition. Nitrogen deposition can cause acidification of soils and can cause damage to plant life. Nitrogen deposition can also increase the risk of damage from abiotic factors such as droughts and frost. Nitrogen deposition can cause litter fall, which is also reducing the amount of light passing through the ground to species. There are many more negatives than positives.
Nitrogen saturation describes the changes of the nitrogen cycle, specifically in forest ecosystems. Nitrogen can become limited when it is lost in streams, groundwater, and the atmosphere. You can also have an excess of nitrogen in a forest's soil. When this happens, plants are less likely to photosynthesize, and because of this, they experience less growth and ultimately more plant death. This occurs because of the abundance of nitrogen. This causes an imbalance among the element ratios, specifically with aluminum in the soil. This causes like root rot, and also the leaves of the plant and tree to die. Also, there's many effects on aquatic ecosystems. In the last couple decades, starting around the early 1900s, the amount of nitrates present in surface waters have increased significantly in the United States, specifically in the Mississippi River. Since 1965, nitrates have more than doubled. This typically occurs from fertilizer, animal waste, and sewage, and there was a study that showed these are the main factors that contributed to the amount of nitrates in the North Atlantic waters. Eutrophication is also very common in bodies of water, and it shows how human-altered nitrogen cycling has affected ecosystems. Hypoxia, which is known for low oxygen, and also anoxia, which is no oxygen, is now very common to form in eustaries. Eutrophication also causes a lack of diversity amongst plankton and other benthic organism communities. This also causes algae blooms, which are highly toxic to ecosystems, to result as a process, and many fish die. Here you can see the eutrophication process. Fertilizer or other forms of nitrates run into the open water. This causes a bloom of algae to occur, which ultimately block the sunlight, and then the fish end up suffocating because they cannot get air from the surface. On the right here, you can see a farmer is testing the color of his plants. Plant color changes depending on how much nitrogen is in the soil. So those are two very important parts of the nitrogen cycle in terms of human effects.
Some factors make it difficult to detect the amount of global change. One of these is marine nitrogen fixation. This is because the estimates for past and current rates in marine ecosystems are somewhat variant and unreliable, so it is hard to determine exactly how much of the marine nitrogen fixation is due to humans. Changing resource limitation is also another variable. It is unknown how species and ecosystems will react when they have not evolved for a dramatic increase in nitrogen. Another factor is background nitrogen deposition and loss. It's difficult to determine past rates when humans did not have such a large impact on global change, but some studies do provide insight on how minimally impacted areas are compared to highly impacted areas.
Overall, the nitrogen cycle is a natural process that is found all over the world, but with disruptions of humans, this process is harmed. By harming the process, the Earth is also harmed by climate change, changes in atmosphere, and the ecosystem around these areas. The combined positive and negative results can be beneficial to the environment by promoting plant growth according to slide 7, but sadly has more negative than positive. Moving forward through the future, there are ways to help this crisis in all environments and surrounding ecosystems, according to slide 12.